Hello there everyone and welcome back to GSL English. My name is Gideon and in today's lesson we are going to study English together through a short story. So if you are new here, let me just very briefly explain how this lesson is going to work. So we are firstly going to read the story in its entirety, okay? And then we're just going to talk about it a little bit to make sure we fully understood what was going on. And then we are going to break it down paragraph by paragraph, isolating different terms, different expressions and vocabulary. So you will most certainly come away from this lesson with something new, but also you'll come away with an idea of how you can study English. So please, before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I post content every week to help you speak natural, fluent and confident English. And if you can give this video a like, it really helps me out. And as always, if you are a returning viewer or listener, then thank you so much for joining me again. So let's start with the lesson. Now, the story that we are going to read today is a very thought-provoking story. It's quite sobering. It really gets you thinking. And it is entitled Alone Among the Stars. Okay, so it is about space. But if you're not interested in space, don't switch off just yet, because it's not really about space itself. It's about somebody's experience of being alone in space and perhaps how it got them thinking as a human in a deeper way. So stick with me on this one. But as we go through, really try to understand the meaning of the story. Try to connect with the character's emotions. How would you feel in this situation? Because if you can do that, if you can connect with this story, with the character on an emotional level, you're much more likely to remember the words and what we are going to look at afterwards. So yeah, we're going to read through it now. Going to take it paragraph by paragraph, then we're going to talk about it, and then we will break it down. So if there's anything that you don't quite understand or you didn't catch, don't worry at all. Just as a note, this is a great opportunity to also practice your speaking skills with me. So perhaps you can pause the video and then repeat after me. And you can do that after each sentence, each paragraph, even each word if you would like to. So let's get into it with paragraph 1. This is Alone Among the Stars. Tom Parker had dreamed of space since he was a child. And after years of training, his moment had finally arrived. As an astronaut on a solo mission aboard the Horizon 9 space station, Tom's job was to conduct experiments in low Earth orbit. The mission was vital for understanding how humans might one day live beyond Earth. The first few days were exhilarating, floating in zero gravity, witnessing breathtaking views of Earth, and completing tasks that felt like the pinnacle of his career. But soon, the isolation began to set in. The only sound was the hum of the space station, and Tom's scheduled check-ins with mission control were brief. The vast silence of space weighed on him. One night, while drifting near the observation window, Tom noticed a single star shining more brightly than the rest. He had seen it before, but now it seemed to offer him a strange comfort, as if it were listening. Over the following days, Tom began talking to the star, sharing his loneliness, frustrations, and thoughts. It became his silent companion, a reminder that even in the infinite emptiness of space, he wasn't entirely alone. As his mission drew to a close, Tom felt relief, but also a strange attachment to the solitude he had experienced. On his final night, he looked at the star one last time. "Thank you," he whispered, smiling at the absurdity of it, yet feeling it was necessary. Back on Earth, surrounded by noise and life, Tom would often glance up at the night sky. And whenever he spotted that same star, he would remember the time he had found not just the stars, but a deeper understanding of himself in the quiet of space. Very short story, isn't it? But it's quite touching. I think it's quite a moving story. So just think to yourself now, before I elaborate on what happened and perhaps something that we can take from it, just think what you got from it. And if you want to listen to it again, please, by all means, go for it. We're in no rush. We just want to relax and, just enjoy our study today. So let's get into just some analysis that we can take from that. So, of course, the story followed the main character, whose name was Tom Parker. Did you get that? His name was Tom Parker. And he was an astronaut on his first solo mission aboard the Horizon 9 space station. He was initially, thrilled by the excitement of space. He's wanted to do it all his life. This was everything he wanted, and the beauty from Earth above just amazed him. But once that kind of set in, he faced the profound loneliness of isolation. He was on his own. Once he'd got past the amazing situation and opportunity, well, then he realized, I'm alone. But during that time, he discovers this single star. It was different to the other stars, and he found companionship in that star. He found comfort in that star, and it led him to reflect on his feelings and his thoughts. It's interesting, how can that come from an object that you don't really have an interaction with? And that's really the main point. But as his mission concludes, Tom realizes that while he did experience loneliness, solitude, he gained a greater understanding of himself. Looking at that star, being on his own, just perhaps even just talking out loud to that star, expressing thoughts that he might not have done so before. He learned something about himself. So the idea of this story is to really emphasize the theme of solitude, being on your own, self-discovery, and the search for connection in the vastness of the universe. We all have to connect with different things on different levels. So that's really the main concept of the story. I would love to know your thoughts. What did you take from it? But now let's dive in to this story. Let's expand upon it with each paragraph. And then we're going to really isolate the vocabulary now. So first of all, it said, he's dreamed of being an astronaut since he was a child, So this has always been on Tom's mind. It's always something he wanted to do. I don't know what your dream was as a child, but it's very rare that they become a reality, isn't it? I wanted to be a professional drummer, but I still play drums, but it didn't become a reality. So he was an astronaut, of course, somebody that goes into space, and it said that he was on a solo mission. And by solo, it means singular. He was on his own, one person, in this case without any other astronauts, on his own, on a solo mission. How would you feel about that? A solo mission to space. I don't know, I find the idea quite terrifying, but also very appealing at the same time. Think about that. Think about how you would feel on a solo mission. Again, connect with this story in any way that you can. So Tom's job was to conduct experiments in low Earth orbit. And this is the area of space close to Earth, where satellites and the space station orbit the planet. So I'm not talking about far, deep into space. Low Earth orbit. So he's orbiting in space, where the satellites orbit Earth. And that's where he is. So he had to conduct experiments there. And it said, that this mission was vital. If something is vital, it's very important. It's essential. It's necessary for a specific purpose. For example, water is vital for life. You can't live without it. So this mission was vital for understanding how humans might one day live beyond Earth. It's a concept, isn't it? An idea that really has fascinated humans for years, but perhaps for many it's becoming more and more of a reality. But, so he was obviously conducting experiments that would progress the idea or the concept of humans living beyond Earth. So there you go. That sets the scene nicely. But the next paragraph really talks about how he's feeling. He says, the first few days were exhilarating. If something is exhilarating, it's unbelievably exciting. It's very exciting. It's energizing. It gets your heart pumping. Can you imagine how you would feel in space? First few days, he was living out his dream as a child. It was exhilarating. Floating in zero gravity. Think of floating, there's no gravity, nothing holding him back. So he's just floating around in air, witnessing breathtaking views of Earth. If something is breathtaking, it's extremely beautiful. So much so that it takes your breath away. I don't know if you've ever seen a sight like that, where you look at the vista, you look at the landscape, or you look at whatever it is, to be honest. It's very subjective and it just takes your breath away. It's so beautiful. It's breathtaking. And, he's looking down on Earth and just thinking, wow, this is just incredible. And this felt like the pinnacle of his career. If you reach the pinnacle of your career, it's the highest point. Pinnacle of the mountain is the tip. This is the biggest achievement in his career and probably will be the biggest achievement. The pinnacle. So it's down from here. He's not going to beat this. This is the top. This is the pinnacle of his career. The pinnacle of my career is these podcasts. I absolutely love it. What's the pinnacle of your career? Maybe you haven't reached it yet. Ask yourself questions like this. Connect with the vocabulary. Connect with the story. I'm going to keep saying that because it is essential to remember and, more importantly, start using these words. So that's the situation. First few days, amazing. But then, the isolation began to set in. He's isolated on his own. Terrifying thought. In space, on your own. He's isolated. So the thought of that isolation began to set in, and the only sound was the hum of the space station. A hum is a continuous, low sound. Perhaps here, the noise of the space station systems just working, really low level. Something like that. That was the only noise. And he said, okay, he had check-ins with mission control, but they were brief. They weren't long. So he wasn't really connecting with anyone. There was no speaking, no conversation. And the vast silence of space weighed on him. Vast, expansive, it was huge, but it weighed on him. And if something weighs on you, it means that something is feeling heavy or troubling, perhaps emotionally, mentally, or both. It's like having a weight on your shoulders. Often when we talk about a problem leaving us or us working through a particular problem, we talk about it being a weight off our shoulders. Meaning we're free again. The weight is off our shoulders. The burden is no longer there. So now this vast silence of space is weighing on him. It's troubling him. It's causing him problems. I completely get that. I love the idea of going to space, but I think being on your own, that isolation would very soon kick in. So one night, while drifting near the observation window, remember, anti-gravity, so he's drifting, floating, or moving slowly without control, is in zero gravity, going near the observation window. And if we observe something, we're looking out. So there's obviously a window in his space station where he can look out at space and try and picture that in your mind. What kind of imagery have you got? How do you imagine the space station to be? This is one of the things I love about reading, is because if we could just go into each other's minds and see what your imagery is, what have you come up with? I'm sure it's very different to what I'm thinking right now. That's the beautiful thing about reading, isn't it? We're not fed what images to see. We come up with them with our own minds. And that's why it's just a brilliant way of improving our English. So he's looking out the window, perhaps feeling quite sorry for himself. But he noticed a single shining star, shining brightly, more brightly than the rest. So there's one star that stands out to him. It's shining brighter. And he said, he had seen it before, but now it seemed to offer him a bit of comfort, as if it were listening. So perhaps he saw that star on his initial few... Not my microphone there. Perhaps he saw that star on his initial few days when he was exhilarated, pumped up by the experience. But now he's looking at that star from a different state, isn't he? He's in a different emotional or mental state. So now he sees that star shining more brightly, and it almost becomes a companion. He looks at it and it offers him a little bit of comfort, like it's reaching out to him. So much so that over the following days, Tom began talking to the star, sharing his loneliness, his frustrations and thoughts. And this is interesting because this doesn't mean that he's gone mad. Maybe he has, I don't know. But maybe this is a point that his life has just led up to. Okay, he's probably talking about the loneliness he's feeling on the ship, the frustrations of being on the ship on your own and his thoughts, but perhaps also he's sharing the thoughts from his life, maybe leading up to this point. He's just sharing everything that he's never been able to say out loud. And it says, an interesting point here is that this paragraph uses the star as a metaphor for how Tom finds comfort in unexpected ways during his solitude. They say, don't you? Sometimes all you need is a good listener. You don't always need advice or someone to say something. So that's what Tom's got here. He's just sharing everything with him. It became his silent companion, a reminder that even in the infinite emptiness of space, he wasn't entirely alone. Great wording there. Is something is infinite, it's limitless, it's boundless. There's no end to it. It's infinite. Of course, space, there's no end to it as we know it. So he is in the infinite emptiness of space. Describing space as it's so vast, it's unbelievably vast. It's limitless. There's no end in sight. But despite that, being up there on his own, he's found this companion in a star. So as his mission drew to a close, Tom felt relief. If you're feeling relief, it's coming back to that idea of a weight being off your shoulders, feeling of relaxation, reassurance. If we are relieved about something, we're happy now. Perhaps we've been stressed about a situation at work, then we get an email and we realise that problem is no more. We're relieved. We feel relief. When was the last time you felt relief? What was it due to? But it's interesting here. So he felt that relief. I'm going back. Everything's okay. But also, he kind of thought, I'm going to miss the solitude. The solitude is the state of being alone, which can be positive or negative, And of course, while I guess it went through a variety of different emotions for him, sometimes the solitude was a positive, and of course at other times it was a negative. But he's realised that actually this solitude was a beautiful thing, because once you're back on Earth, there is no solitude, is there? Like that would compare to him in space. So on his final night, he looked at the star and just says, thank you. Like saying that to a friend that you're not going to see for a while. Thank you. But as he says that, he's also kind of smiling, because it says that he smiled at the absurdity of what was happening. It's ridiculous. It's unreasonable. I'm talking to a star. But he still felt it was necessary. I love that. He's saying thank you to a star. He knows it's absurd. He knows it's crazy. But also that star perhaps allowed him to talk about things that he might not have done so before, that he needed to. So he felt that was necessary. So gets back to Earth, surrounded by noise and life. Oh, could you imagine that? Going from that complete solitude back to Earth. So, of course, there would have been countless pros of being back on Earth, but there would have been an element where you miss that solitude. And it said that Tom would often glance up at night, to look up quickly or casually. And whenever he spotted the same star, spotted is to see or notice something, he'd remember the time he had found not just the stars, but a deeper understanding of himself in the quiet of space. Really interesting idea there, isn't it? That, it might be the same star. Maybe Tom's imagining it's the same star. We don't know. But every time he'd look up, it just take him back to reality. And I guess it was quite a comfort for him. That realization that, he's got more of a deeper understanding of himself now. So there you go. It's a very interesting story, isn't it? And it does get you thinking, as humans, we do like to be with other people. We need companionship, but there is sometimes we find a lot about ourselves, don't we, when we are alone. In solitude is often when we learn most. So there you go. great new vocabulary there. We went through some interesting terms. Make sure you try to connect with that vocabulary on a personal level. Write down sentences that apply to your life. And even better, try using it over the coming week and see how you get on. So that was a brief study lesson with me today. If you do want to learn more, or if you want to just listen to some relaxed British English, then make sure you check out other episodes on this channel and on the podcast. And of course, as always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and say hi in the comments. All right. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a good one, guys.